Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I've got a story that's really going to hit home for you. Imagine having a near-death experience, meeting your late father, and then getting a message from Jesus about why good people go through tough times. This is the incredible journey of Lennox Harper, and you won't believe what he found out. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any upcoming videos. Get ready. This story might just change how you think about everything. Hi there, I'm Lennox Harper. I'm 38 years old and work as a mechanic in a repair shop in Boise, Idaho. I've never considered myself special. I'm just an everyday guy living life like everyone else, with its mix of highs and lows. I grew up in a middle-class family, went to school, graduated, and started working. Nothing too out of the ordinary. For most of my life, I identified as a firm atheist. I never believed in God or an afterlife. To me, those were just stories people told themselves to cope with death. I was all about logic and science, rarely thinking about anything spiritual. But everything changed on March 15, 2017. It started out as a typical day in my life, but turned into a moment that completely flipped my perspective on life and death. At that time, I was single and had just matched with a woman named Mia Williams on a dating app. We were set to meet for our first date that evening, and I felt both excited and nervous, like something big was about to happen. If someone had told me that morning that my life was about to change forever, I probably would have laughed it off. But life has a funny way of leading us down unexpected paths. That night turned into an experience I could never have imagined, one that shook my beliefs down to their core and made me rethink everything I thought I knew. Now, I'm not the kind of person who likes the spotlight or shares wild stories. Honestly, I debated for a long time whether to open up about this, but I feel it's important to share, not to sway anyone's beliefs, but because it truly transformed my life. What I'm about to share might sound unbelievable, but it's real. To some, I know this might sound unbelievable, and honestly, I would have been the first to doubt it before that night. But what I'm about to share is absolutely true, just as it unfolded for me. It's about my near-death experience, my brush with the afterlife, and how it changed my perspective on everything. So if you're willing to listen, I'd like to share this journey with you, one that took me from the edge of life to the brink of death and back again, reshaping everything I thought I knew about existence. It was Saturday, March 15th, 2020, and I woke up early like I usually do. The sun was shining brightly outside, and for some reason, I felt an unusual sense of hope. Maybe it was because I was excited about meeting Emily. I'm not really sure. I went about my day at work, tackling my tasks as a software developer, solving problems, running through code, and jumping into meetings, just the usual routine. As the day progressed, I started feeling a bit jittery about my upcoming dinner with Emily. She seemed like an amazing person, and I wanted to make a great impression. I wrapped up at the office a little early, rounding off my workday at around 4:30 p.m. and headed home to get ready. I took a long shower and carefully picked out my outfit. I decided to go for something casual but nice, a black polo, khaki pants, and a light jacket. I spritzed on my favorite cologne and took one last glance in the mirror. I was all set. By around 6:30 p.m., I left my apartment. The plan was to swing by Emily's place and then head to a new burger spot that had just opened downtown. I hopped into my blue Toyota Corolla and hit the road, driving through the calm streets of Tucson. The night was warm, the sky was clear, and I could see the stars twinkling. The streets were pretty empty, so I cranked up the radio and started tapping my fingers to the beat, feeling good about the night ahead. I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't notice how quickly time was passing. Before I knew it, I was approaching Emily's street, quiet and lined with nice homes. I slowed down a bit, scanning for her house number, when, out of nowhere, everything changed in an instant. As I was looking at the numbers, I suddenly saw bright headlights racing towards me. It all happened so fast. I heard tires screeching on the pavement, saw those lights closing in, and then darkness. I don't know exactly what happened at that moment. I didn't feel any pain, and I didn't hear any crash. It was as if someone had flipped a switch on the world. One second I was driving on a quiet street in my neighborhood, and the next I was in total darkness. At that time, I didn't realize that a speeding car had come out of nowhere and smashed into mine. I didn't know that the collision was so bad that doctors would later say it was a miracle I made it through. All I knew was that my world had plunged into a dark, silent void, and it was in this darkness that my journey beyond life began, an experience that would completely change how I viewed life, death, and what might come next. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It was so deep it felt heavy. There was absolutely no sound, no background noise, nothing. It was like sound itself had vanished. I tried to open my eyes, but it didn't help. The darkness was total. It wasn't like being in a dark room where there might be shadows or hints of light. This was a darkness that seemed to consume everything, even the idea of space. I started to feel panic. I wanted to move, but I couldn't sense my body at all. There was no feeling of warmth or chill. I didn't feel the air in my lungs. It was as if I had become pure consciousness, just floating around in a vast emptiness. I tried to shout, to call for help, but no sound came out. Or maybe it did, but I couldn't hear it. The feeling of despair grew. Where was I, and what had happened? Was I dead? I can't say how long I was stuck in that place. It could have been minutes, hours, or even days. Time didn't seem to exist. I kept swinging between moments of overwhelming fear and strange, calm acceptance. During those calm spells, memories started flashing through my mind like a movie reel. I saw bits of my childhood, my parents, my school days. I relived moments of happiness and sorrow, successes and disappointments. It was like my whole life was playing out in front of me in an instant. Then I remembered my mother, Jenna Carter, who had passed away a couple of years ago. The pain of that memory hit me like a punch to the gut. I still hadn't fully come to terms with her death. I carried so much anger and sadness. I thought about how I had always been skeptical of the idea of fate and what happens after we die. I used to laugh at other people's beliefs, thinking I was clever for not falling for what I saw as childish stories. Fast forward to now, I found myself lost in the dark, unsure if I was even alive or dead. Desperation started to creep in, and I felt utterly alone, like I had been left behind in this empty space. Then, when I hit my lowest point, something totally unexpected happened. Someone who had never really believed in anything beyond what I could see, found myself doing something I never imagined I would. I began to pray. It wasn't anything fancy or structured, just a simple, desperate plea for help. God, if you're out there, please help me, I shouted silently in my head. Don't leave me here all alone. In that instant, something shifted. It was like my cry had pierced through an invisible wall. The darkness began to fade away, giving way to something entirely new. That's when my journey truly kicked off. Right in the middle of that thick darkness, a tiny light appeared. At first, it was like a faraway star, but then it grew, spreading out until it surrounded me completely. The brightness of this light was unlike anything I'd ever known before. It was brighter than the sun or any light I had seen on Earth, but strangely, it didn't hurt my eyes. It felt like I wasn't just seeing the light with my eyes, but experiencing it with my whole being. It was beyond words. Picture diving into a sea of pure light, where every speck shines with an incredible glow. It was like that, but so much more intense and real. Along with this light came an overwhelming sense of love and peace that was far greater than anything I had ever felt in my life. It was a warm, unconditional love that surrounded me from all sides, making all my pain and fear from the darkness vanish in an instant. In that moment, I felt completely safe and truly accepted. It was as if I had come home after a long time away, like for the first time I found myself exactly where I was meant to be. The light seemed alive, not still but throbbing and alive, as if it had its own awareness. I had this feeling that this light knew me deeply. It understood every little detail about my life, every thought I'd ever had, every choice I'd ever made. And despite it all, it loved me without conditions. As the light got brighter, I started to notice something unusual. Shapes started to come into focus around me. At first, they were just vague outlines, but slowly they became clearer. And then I saw him standing there in the light, my dad, Gabriel Harper. He looked just as I remembered him before everything fell apart and led to his death. He smiled at me, a smile full of warmth and understanding. I was speechless. How was this happening? My dad had been gone for 3 years, and here I was, a staunch atheist, witnessing my father in this amazing light. It didn't make any sense, but it felt real, more real than anything I had ever experienced. It was like I was finally seeing things as they truly are. As my dad walked closer, I could feel his love. In that moment, all the questions and doubts I had about life after death and whether God existed seemed unimportant compared to the reality right in front of me. Standing there, illuminated by that brilliant light, in front of my father, whom I thought I'd lost forever, I felt ready to learn lessons that would stick with me for life. Seeing him there was a shock. Gabriel Harper, the man who had struggled with deep sadness and ended his own life, now radiated this incredible light. He smiled at me with a love I hadn't seen in the last years of his life. "Dad," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "How is this possible?" He stepped closer, and the comfort of his presence washed over me. "Lennox, my son," he said, his voice exactly as I remembered it. "I know this must be overwhelming for you." I was at a loss for words. A flood of questions rushed through my mind. Why had he taken his life? Why had he left us? How could he appear so peaceful after everything? As if he could hear my thoughts, my father spoke again. "I know you're confused and hurting, son. I realize what I did caused you and your mother a lot of pain, and I truly regret that." Tears welled up in my eyes. "You shouldn't be here," I said, echoing what I had always heard about suicide. "How can you be in this beautiful place after what happened?" My father smiled. "Everyone goes to heaven, Lennox, but before we get there, we all have to go through a process," my father explained. I was confused by his words. "What do you mean by that?" I asked. He continued, "What you think of as hell isn't really a place of eternal punishment, son. It's more like a way to cleanse yourself. After I passed away, I had to relive every moment when I hurt others, especially you and your mom. It was like my soul was being torn apart, only to be put back together until I was finally free." As he spoke, I could feel the truth in what he was saying. It was as if in that place there was no room for lies, only pure truth. "The darkness you felt, Lennox," he went on, "was your own struggle with believing in God, something you had to overcome. But you did it, son. You reached out for help, and it came." Tears streamed down my face as I thought about all the anger and unanswered questions that had built up over the years. "Why did you leave us, Dad? Why did you leave me?" Looking down, my father's voice was gentle but heavy with sorrow. "I just didn't have the strength, son. The pain felt too much to bear, and I couldn't see a way out. But now I realize I was wrong. There's always hope, always a way out. I just couldn't see it then." In that moment, I understood what my father needed from me: forgiveness. To my surprise, I felt ready to give it. "I forgive you, Dad," I said, and suddenly a huge weight lifted off my chest. As soon as I said those words, it felt like something inside me broke and repaired at the same time. It was like a massive stone I had been carrying was finally gone. My soul was healing, just like his. He hugged me, and in that embrace, I felt all his love for me, his regrets, and his gratitude for my forgiveness. It was a hug that went beyond words. "Thanks, son," he said, "but you need to keep going. Your journey isn't finished yet." I didn't want to leave him. After so many years filled with anger and pain, I finally felt like I had my dad back. But deep down, I knew he was right. My journey wasn't done. My father smiled one last time and began to walk away. "Remember, Lennox, love is the most powerful force in the universe. Never forget that." And just like that, he was gone. But the peace and love he left behind stayed with me. I felt like something important had changed within me. The forgiveness I gave my dad wasn't just for him, it was also a gift to myself. As I found myself in this bright space, I could feel something big was about to happen, and I was ready for it. After meeting my father, the brightness around me grew even more intense, like I was diving deeper into this incredible experience. Out of nowhere, I appeared in a place that was beyond anything I could describe. Think of the most stunning place you've ever visited, and then picture it multiplied by 1,000. That still wouldn't compare to what I was seeing. There were colors I couldn't even begin to name, so vivid and alive. The sky, if that's what you could call it, was a deep, radiant blue, almost glowing with life. Fields of flowers shimmered like they had their own light, with each petal exuding a beauty that felt deeper than just looks. But it wasn't just how beautiful it all was. It was the feeling of being there. I felt utterly at peace. No fear, no worries, no pain. For the very first time, I felt completely at home. And the love in that space, it was indescribable. It felt like everything around me was made of pure love, an unconditional love that embraced me fully, with all my flaws and imperfections. As I took in my surroundings, I noticed I wasn't alone. There were others. Well, I'm not sure calling them people is quite right. They were beings of light, glowing with incredible brilliance. They moved gracefully, almost floating. A few came closer, and even though no one said a word, I somehow just knew who they were. I recognized my grandparents, who had passed away when I was young, and a childhood friend who had tragically died in a car accident when he was just 16. They welcomed me with such warmth and joy that it left me feeling a bit overwhelmed. The most mind-blowing part? I could talk to them without words. It felt like our thoughts and feelings flowed between us naturally. There was no need for speech. Everything was understood instantly. At that moment, I realized that death wasn't the end. It was just a shift to another kind of existence, one much richer and fuller than I could have imagined. I wanted nothing more than to stay there forever, thinking about the idea of going back to my life on Earth with all its ups and downs. The struggles and limits I faced felt almost too much to bear. How could I leave all this calm, all this love, to return to my regular life? But then, something inside me kept reminding me that I had a purpose, that my time here wasn't finished yet. That's when I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw a bright figure walking toward me. This figure was different from the others. His light was even more powerful and compassionate, and somehow I just knew who he was. It was Jesus. When I realized who was in front of me, I was lost for words. Jesus didn't look like the pictures I had seen before. He had striking deep blue-green eyes and wavy brown hair, dressed simply in a baptismal robe. But more than his appearance, it was the wave of love and strength that radiated from him that struck me. He approached me with a warm smile, and there was no need for introductions. I just knew him, and he definitely knew me. "Lennox," he said, his voice resonating not just in my ears but throughout my entire being. "Welcome." I wanted to ask a million questions, but I just couldn't find the words. How could a firm atheist be standing here talking with Jesus? It turned everything I believed upside down. Jesus, as if reading my mind, smiled again. "I know this is tough for you to wrap your head around, Lennox. Your beliefs, or lack of them, don't change the truth of what's happening. I'm here, you're here, and this is real." Finally, I managed to speak up. "But how? Why? I didn't even believe in you." "Belief isn't a requirement for love," Jesus replied. "I care for everyone, no matter their beliefs, and you're here because there is something important for you to understand." He reached out his hand, and as soon as I touched it, I was shown a vision. I saw my life on Earth, and I saw Isabel, the woman I was about to meet that very night, along with children, my future children. "Your journey on Earth isn't over yet, Lennox," Jesus said gently. "You have a purpose to fulfill, people to love, lives to touch." I felt a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, the thought of leaving this place of peace and love seemed impossible, but on the other hand, the idea of having a family and a meaningful life drew me in. "But how can I go back?" I asked. "How can I live knowing what I know now? How can I tell people about this?" Jesus smiled. "You don't have to explain everything, Lennox. Some things just can't be put into words. What matters is how you live your life from now on, and take the love you found here back with you. Share it with others." I nodded, starting to get it, but there was still one question bugging me, something I'd always wondered about. "Liam," I said, gathering my courage, "why do good people go through so much? Why is there so much hurt in the world, if God is love?" Liam looked at me with kindness. "Lennox, suffering is a part of growing spiritually. Good hearts often face tougher challenges because they have a greater ability to grow and help others. Pain teaches empathy, builds inner strength, and gets people ready for bigger missions. It's not a punishment, it's a chance to grow. Anyone who pushes through pain will find lasting peace and happiness. And remember, you're never alone in your suffering. I'm always with you, even when you don't notice." His words really touched my heart. I began to see suffering in a whole new light. "It's time for you to head back, Lennox," Liam said gently. Remember what you've felt here. Take this love with you and share it with the world." Before I could respond, I felt a force pulling me back. The light started to fade, and the last thing I saw was Liam's warm smile as I was whisked back to my life on Earth. The shift back to reality was sudden and confusing. One moment I was surrounded by Liam's light and love, and the next, I was back in my body, feeling pain and disorientation. The first thing I noticed was the steady beeping of machines around me, counting my heartbeat. I tried to open my eyes, but they felt so heavy. Gradually, I became more aware of my body. Pain lanced through me, especially in my chest and head. Finally, I managed to crack my eyes open. The bright lights in the hospital room were blinding compared to the gentle light I'd felt earlier. I blinked several times to clear my vision, and that's when I saw a familiar face hovering over me. It was Jenna. Her eyes were puffy and red, like she'd been crying for a while. When she saw I was awake, her face broke into a relieved smile. "Lennox!" she exclaimed, grabbing my hand. "You're awake! Oh, thank God!" I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and scratched. Jenna quickly grabbed a cup of water with a straw and helped me sip some. What happened?" I whispered, barely able to get the words out. Isabel told me that I had been in a really bad car crash. A drunk driver had swerved into my lane and hit me head on. The hit was so hard that the doctors were shocked I made it. "You were in a coma for 3 days, Lennox," she said, tears in her eyes. "The doctors weren't sure if I would wake up. It felt impossible. What I went through felt like it lasted forever, yet also just a blink." Slowly, more details came to light. I had a bunch of broken ribs, a nasty concussion, and I had surgery to stop internal bleeding. The doctors said it was a miracle I was alive. That word, miracle, just echoed in my head. I had never really believed in miracles before, but now I felt like I'd experienced something beyond what we usually understand. As the days went by in the hospital, I kept quiet about what I had gone through. How could I explain what I experienced? I struggled to find the words for the overwhelming love I felt, the time I spent with my dad, the conversation I had with Jesus. Isabel was there for me the whole time. She canceled her work plans and stayed overnight at the hospital. Her love and support meant the world to me. I began to see in her the same kind of love I felt in that other place. When I finally got out of the hospital 2 weeks later, I was a different person. It wasn't just about my body. I still had a long way to go in healing physically, but mentally and emotionally, the near-death experience had shifted my entire perspective on life. Once I was a firm atheist, but now I knew there was so much more to life than just what we see and touch. I had a fresh appreciation for love, life, and human connections. Every moment felt valuable, and every conversation felt like a chance to share the love I had felt. So, with Isabel by my side, I began my journey back to living, a life that would be very different from what I had before. The months after leaving the hospital were filled with deep reflection and change. My physical recovery was slow and sometimes tough. I had to go through a lot of physical therapy to get back my strength and movement. But compared to the emotional changes I was going through, the physical part felt almost insignificant. The near-death experience had changed my outlook so deeply. I started seeing the world in a whole new light. Things that once seemed so crucial, like money, now looked different. After my experience, all the stuff I used to think was important felt pretty pointless compared to the love and connections I had discovered. My relationship with Isabel grew stronger. She had stuck by me while I healed, and I found myself really falling for her. To me, she represented the kind of unconditional love I had felt during my experience. 6 months after the accident, I proposed, and seeing the tears of joy in her eyes when she said yes was unforgettable. My outlook on work changed too. I was still a good engineer, but the fierce desire to climb the corporate ladder wasn't there anymore. Instead, I began looking for ways to use my skills to make a difference for others. I got involved in engineering projects in low-income neighborhoods, aiming to improve lives through my work. One of the biggest shifts was in how I viewed spirituality. I had always been a firm skeptic of religion, but now I found myself feeling more spiritual. I didn't join any specific faith, but I developed a routine of meditation and quiet reflection. Those moments of stillness helped me reconnect with that peace and love I had felt before. I started reading a bunch about near-death experiences and different philosophies, and it was comforting to learn that others had similar journeys. I became more open to different beliefs, respecting everyone's unique spiritual paths. My feelings about death changed completely. While I didn't lose all fear of it, the anxiety I once had was replaced by a new understanding that death is just a part of life, not the end. This insight made me value life more and pushed me to enjoy each day. Little things, like a beautiful sunset, a child's laughter, or a warm hug, started to mean so much more to me. I made an effort to be present in every moment and really appreciate those around me. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Some people were skeptical when I tried to talk about my experience. A few friends couldn't handle the change, and even my supportive family sometimes seemed puzzled by my new perspective. I also had to learn to cope with moments of doubt along the way. There are days when those experiences feel so far away, almost like memories from a dream, and I find myself questioning if they really happened. In those moments, I hold on tight to the loving feelings I experienced and the peace that came with it. It always brings me back to my center. One big takeaway for me has been about letting go of grudges. The forgiveness I offered my father during my tough times spilled over into other parts of my life. I learned to forgive more easily, realizing that holding on to anger only weighed me down. As the years rolled by, Isabel and I created the family that felt meant to be, just like I imagined. We welcomed 2 amazing kids, and each time one of them was born, it was a beautiful reminder of life's wonders. Raising them with love and kindness has become my main goal. Looking back, I can see that night on October 5th, 2015, was truly when everything changed for me. That car accident that nearly cost me my life actually opened the door to a fresh start, filling my life with new purpose and meaning. It's been over 8 years since that life-changing moment, and I still catch myself reflecting on its impact. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that I was surrounded by that incredible light, having deep conversations with my Father and Jesus. Other times it feels like it happened in a different lifetime. One thing I know for sure is that experience has reshaped who I am and how I view the world today. Now at 45, I see a journey of growth that's still ongoing. My marriage to Isabel brings me joy and pushes me to grow every day. Our kids, now 7 and 5, remind me of the beauty of life every single day. Watching them grow and learn has been one of the biggest blessings in my life. On the work front, I found a balance I never thought possible. I still work as an engineer, but a significant portion of my job is now focused on projects that help communities. Finding ways to use my skills to improve lives provides me a sense of purpose that surpasses anything I've felt in my old job. My spiritual journey is still a vital part of my life. Even though I don't follow any particular religion, I practice meditation and prayer regularly. These quiet moments help me reconnect with that feeling of peace and love I felt during my brush with death. One of the greatest joys has been having the chance to share my story with others, not to convince anyone of anything, but just to share my journey. I've been sharing my story in small support groups for folks who've been through similar tough times, and it's incredible how much healing can come from hearing each other out. Of course, it's not always sunshine and rainbows. I still deal with challenges, just like everyone else. Some days I feel frustrated, sad, or anxious, but the difference now is my outlook on these bumps in the road. I know they're temporary and that there's a bigger purpose behind everything. One of the biggest lessons I've picked up is about love. The love I felt during my near-death experience was total and unconditional. I try to bring that love into everyday life and how I interact with others. It's not simple, but it's definitely worth it. Another lesson is about how connected we all are. During that moment, I felt a real unity with everything around me, which has made me more aware of the environment and eager to live more in tune with nature. People often ask me if I fear death now. Honestly, I don't fear death itself, but I hold a deep appreciation for life. Every single day is a gift, a chance to show love, grow, and make a change. If I could share one key takeaway from my experience, it would be this. Love is the strongest force in the universe. It goes beyond death, heals wounds, and brings us closer together. Live with love. Show compassion to others and forgive easily. Life's too short for anger, fear, or grudges. My near-death experience opened my eyes to the idea that there's so much more to life than what we can see or touch. There's a deep mystery at the core of reality, filled with love and purpose. I don't have all the answers. Who does? But I've learned to live with this uncertainty and embrace life's mysteries. Looking ahead, I feel a blend of excitement and gratitude. I don't know what tomorrow might bring, but I know each day is a gift, a chance to love and grow. And for that, I'm truly thankful. My journey is ongoing, and there's so much more for me to learn and experience. But one thing I know for sure is that night in April 2021 was not the end of my story. It was just the start of a new life, one filled with purpose, love, and meaning. And for that, I'll always be grateful.